Amy Martin with dissertation Poetess on the Periphery, revisiting the question of a female poetic tradition in Hellenistic poetry.
For me, seeing her walk onto that stage, emotional. The best moment of my life.
This April, 33-year-old Western Cape local Amy Martin graduated with her PhD from Stellenbosch University. Her thesis re-examined the role of female poets in ancient Greece.
My dad always took us on field trips to go and see fossils in the Cederberg. So I can attribute my passion and my love for the ancient world to my father.
She did a PhD at this very table that we're sitting at now. I brought her coffee, I made her food, and look where we are.
Globally, only 1% of university graduates have a PhD. It's an achievement beyond most of us. But Dr. Amy Martin has overcome a lot more than you or me to get to this point. In fact, a quarter of Amy's skull is filled not with brain tissue, but spinal fluid. She was only 14 when her normal, healthy childhood was brutally interrupted.
I was having dinner with my family one evening and the fork fell out of my hand.
She complained of headaches, blurred vision, dizziness, balance problems.
Her father, Barry, remembers receiving the news. An MRI scan had revealed a large tumor inside Amy's skull.
Obviously, it just took the wind out my sails. And, you know, you have visions of your daughter losing her life.
Everything happened so fast. The one moment they did an MRI, and the next morning I was in the hospital, and a few days later I had my first brain operation.
The tumor was a rare but benign juvenile pilocytic astrocytoma. Luckily, it was in an accessible part of her brain, so it was successfully removed. But little did Amy know this was only the beginning of the journey.
About a year after I had my first brain operation, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and that was probably the biggest challenge that I had to face.
The severity of her seizures left Amy afraid to leave the house.
We were always conscious of it, almost 24/7. My other daughter, Nina, she's very sporty. So we would go to the school, and sometimes she had epileptic fit right there next to the netball court, and it was difficult to deal, especially for her.
The quest for a solution brought Amy to neurosurgeon Dr. 𝗀𝗃𝗋𝗋, who discovered that the tumor had grown back.
We open the skull and we slide these electrodes over the surface of the brain, and then that wire comes out to be monitored.
Okay.
And from that information, it's possible to return to remove the tumor and also remove a brain tissue which is close to the tumor that is the cause of the epilepsy.
But this meant a third procedure that came with major risks.
This over here is the part of the brain responsible for moving arm and leg. So if the surgeon travels into that part of the brain, then the person ends up by having a paralysis. And if the surgeon goes too far back into this occipital area, there may be significant disturbance in vision.
He absolutely saved my life. You know, it wasn't just a case of taking the tumor away so that I could live, but actually offering me a normal, healthy, stable life, because you can survive with epilepsy, right, with seizures, but it's a very low quality of life.
This is a scan of Amy's brain. The tumor affected the parietal area, and once it was removed, it left the massive cavity that we see here.
The parietal lobe is to do with your orientation in space. If we were to operate on you in this area, not being quite as young as
but
Amy
not much
was,
older, but also not much older.
But now, then you might have difficulty with orientating yourself.
Okay.
You know, you get up to go to the kitchen and you find yourself in the bathroom by mistake.
However, in a young person like Amy, the brain is able to compensate for the loss of tissue through a process called plasticity.
Family members make jokes, you know, that she has a screw loose in her head because, of course, I have titanium screws and plates in my head.
Do you really?
Yes. And I do still struggle with my balance. I do experience dizziness now and then. Severe headaches now and then, but ultimately I live a healthy, normal life.
After more than a decade, scans show no recurrence of the tumor, and Amy has thrown herself into her future. She's working on a book based on her PhD research, and in just a few days, she heads back to South Korea for a third stint as an English instructor.
I promised myself that if I survive all of this, that I was going to see the world.
She lives life harder than most people who've never had any of these problems.
I was terrified for a few years after my brain operations. I lived a very secluded, very cautious life. But today I challenge myself to open myself up to, you know, new challenges. And that's just the best I can do.